no chaser. And all right, let's just get into it. So, think of a hypothetical. Let's say that recently your drinking has come into question. Maybe in your own thoughts, maybe the legal system has some questions, as in you got in trouble, maybe some trouble at work, or family, spouse, people around you have kind of been either walking around eggshells or one person blatantly tells you, hey, I think you have a problem with drinking. And this is all hypothetical, not making any judgments on who's watching this. But let's say you're checking a video like this out because you're wondering, am I an alcoholic or not? Now, here's the thing. I would say that anybody who tells you they can give a direct, definitive answer, I would be very suspicious about. There are plenty of things which can suggest if you are an alcoholic. There's a lot of things such as your habits when you drink, frequency, stuff like that. They have a whole measuring system online, but when they actually measure it in drinks, it's kind of silly because half the people I knew in college then were alcoholics technically. Sometimes people can be alcoholic in different ways too. Some people, have the classic drinking alone type things. Some people they may not drink every day, but they binge horribly and they always binge when they drink. And I mean, there is truly a lot of gray area when it comes to this. And, it's one thing that kind of separates the kind of alcoholism nature to the addiction nature, because, addiction is usually one of those things where if you're doing meth or, harder drugs, fentanyl, heroin, just anything intravenous at that point. I mean, that's kind of no one just kind of does that in their free time. There always is exceptions to the rule, but I mean, it's come on, if you're shooting up, it's not just a weekend thing or over 4th of July or something. So there is gray area to whether someone's an alcoholic. And there's people I've come across all the time that have questioned it. And, I'll tell you one thing about myself is that years and years and years ago, I used to be the person that had the notion that if you have to ask the question, you probably are. And the thing is that as I've gone through more life experiences, met more people that have practiced, been in and out of recovery, and just again, people in my personal life, I've learned that's truly not the case. There's friends of mine, now that I've gotten older, there's friends of mine that, I had drank with around the, college, younger 20s age, that they questioned if they were alcoholic. And, my initial thought was, well, if you're drinking with me, you probably are. But then I've seen them, years later where they still drink just occasionally and they're fine. And that is one thing. If you wanted to give some sort of definitive thing about if you're an alcoholic or not, that is one thing that I would say classifies it, at the very least, is that you will not go back to drinking normally forever. There's not just a way you can flip back on for the rest of your life where you'll drink normally. Then, at that point, if you had issues in the past, I would say you're a problem drinker, binge drinker, whatever you want to call it. But here's the thing, and this is the point I want to make. If a person is watching a video like this, looking it up, questioning if they're alcoholic, most likely they're not just doing it like it's some personality quiz, or some Facebook thing, like which Marvel superhero character are you, or which Disney princess, ooh, am I an alcoholic? No. They're usually looking it up because they're maybe trying to prescribe the amount of help they need, or, what they should do. And here's what I would say to that question. Does it really matter? And I know you may be thinking, oh, come on, that's bullcrap. You're not answering the question, and, you're probably just trying to be, bombastic about it, or, directly, contradictory. But, I truly believe this sentiment of does it really matter, for the reason of if you're trying to figure out if you're an alcoholic or not. Because here's the thing. Usually this comes into question, almost 99.9% of the time, you face some sort of, external consequences. There may have always been internal ones there, just feeling like crap, depression, this bad stuff going on in your mind. But usually it's the intervention of external things. Something happened at work, something happened legally, something happened in your interpersonal relationships. Something or things have occurred that have put this into question. And here's the reason why I say I don't really think it matters so much is because, okay, let's say if you are not an alcoholic, here's the thing. To tackle that problem, you could probably institute much lesser levels of intervention, whatever you want to call it, into your life that an alcoholic wouldn't need. Basically, in a sense, you'd be able to kind of use willpower, or use the willpower that is being provided for the consequences, kind of basically do it on your own in a sort of way. You can start like, you know, jogging, setting up like minor goals, just all like the very like set it, just changing your life in ways that doesn't require any sort of 12-step or recovery related measures or any sort of alcohol, drug counseling, like, and none of that like very specific recovery stuff you can do to alleviate the consequences and the problems that drinking in your life has caused. I've known plenty of people that did that, again, that were in that gray area at a point in time where like, man, am I an alcoholic? Because look at this trouble I brought upon myself. They didn't really think they were, and it was of no consequence to them because actually they weren't an alcoholic. They were able to change things up, do things, take care of the consequences, remedy their problems without sort of the recovery intervention. Now here's the other side of it. So it's like, okay, what if you are an alcoholic and you're not sure if you are? I mean, doesn't that matter in some sense? And here's the reason why I say not really. Because the thing is that, one, and this is something I would also say is one of those things that is almost like a general set in stone truth, is that no one can, well, I was going to say no one can tell you but you're an alcoholic by yourself, but that's not very true. What I mean is no one can get you to believe that you're an alcoholic except yourself. I mean, believe me, if you want to see like just crazy amount of forms of denial, check out lives of active alcoholics and addicts that are all over, everywhere, in a sense, where it's just like, holy crap, how are they still doing this? How can they not believe they don't have an addiction or a problem with all the stuff going on? And it's not that these people are stupid. It's that there's a delusion their addictive mind has created to where they can keep doing the thing that they really, really want to do, or they feel that they have to do, and it will do anything to psychologically protect themselves from doing that. And, there's also the sense, too, where it doesn't even have to be like a hardcore sort of delusion or denial. There's people that are kind of on the cusp. Internally they have all these things that you would think an alcoholic would have, as far as like the need to drink, the craving, all those like kind of cornerstones of alcoholism that's there. But their brain may just kind of be like, well, maybe I'm not, so it can always keep the door open for drinking in the future or near future. It is crazy what the mind will do to try to protect the secret or the want, to keep drinking or using. I mean, in this case, we're really talking about drinking because, as I stated before, when it comes to like, addiction to like harder drugs, that usually doesn't get questioned as much. Alcohol is so ubiquitous and it's so used like throughout the world. And not only that, but it's also like people don't just like a lot of people get like drunk, like get really like wasted. They have periods of time. And another thing that brought this like whole alcoholic or not question into more grayness was like, especially during COVID, I knew a lot of people that were not alcoholic that drank alcoholically during COVID because of the mental health problems, because of the changes in their life, the isolation, all that type of stuff. And it's like, well, man, I know these people aren't alcoholic, but they sure are acting like it. And so that, people take those examples in their lives and take it into consideration. But back to the point of like, if you're an alcoholic and you don't believe you are, or you're on the cusp, or you're not sure, really in your heart of hearts, no one's gonna like, I don't know, really convince you. Or here's the thing too, and this is a bigger part of it. If you're talking about getting help and really trying to remedy this problem, there's people like all over, a majority of people through their journey of alcoholism, you like yours truly as well, that even knew they were an alcoholic and it did not help them with stop drinking. Like it was just a fact that for a very long time, the way I drank and just the way it was used, like I couldn't even be that delusional at a certain point. It was like, I know I'm an alcoholic. But just even that knowing, having like what should have been the relief of like a diagnosis for myself and truly believing it, didn't change anything. It may have made me a little bit more bummed out when I was drinking because I knew like the harsh reality of this, but it didn't change like any sort of thing where it made it easier not to do it. And like that's again the kind of the thesis of this whole point of like, if you're questioning if you're an alcoholic or not, is like, again, it brings it down to, if you're really not, then it means you have the ability to where you don't need those recovery sort of like, like again, you talk about like 12-step or counseling or just very like drug and alcohol, chemical abuse sort of like interventions. You have the capability to not need that stuff to be able to remedy your problems. And so you go on the other side, it's like if you are an alcoholic, but you're in the stage if you're wondering if you are or not, again, if what we're talking about, if you're trying to find the answer to this question to diagnose like what help you do need, the thing is that if you're on the fence about it, having somebody, having some graph, having some chart, having some definition by like some, psychologists or, drug and alcohol counselors, having your friends, families, coworkers, having everybody tell you that you are an alcoholic is not going to fix it. We're like, oh, now I know the problem, so things are good. Like your belief in it or not isn't directly correlated to what your ability is to be in recovery. I mean, and that may seem crazy. It's like, well, if you truly know that there's a problem, like, shouldn't that be a sort of leg up? But here's the thing, and this is something that, like, again, a huge majority of alcoholics go through, where there's been so many times people have been like, oh, yes, I am an alcoholic, and then they take it back. Where they have maybe some time of sobriety and they go, you know what, maybe I was just overreacting. That was a bad time in my life. I can drink normally now. Or my life is better now. I can drink. I mean, people do that all the time. Even people, again, yours truly, that have lived a totally reckless, like, awful alcoholic, so clearly alcoholic life, and then delusions come up of like, well, that was just a phase, or I'll drink normally, I'll moderate, I know how to control it this time around. I mean, so that's the thing, again, why I go back to, like, does it really matter, is that you could even come to the conclusion that you're an alcoholic, but your mind and that, addictive mind will try to take that back. So, I mean, what my advice would be, I mean, I would just say, be able to take suggestion from people of what you should do, whether you believe you are or not. If you're in a certain point where you're facing some sort of consequences or ultimatums or some problems in your life, just be open to do whatever, is like professionals or people suggest of you. Because even in the end of the day, it's just like, well, I shouldn't do this stuff because, I'm not really an alcoholic. But if you find it helpful, just do it anyways. I mean, what was the waste? Like, oh, I felt stupid because I thought I was an alcoholic for those like couple of months. If you get your life back together, why does it really matter? I don't know. There's plenty of thoughts on this. That's just kind of one of the main points I wanted to make here. If you like this sort of content, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share with friends, just whatever. What, everybody out there, be well, have a good one, stay strong, whatever you need to do to get by. Thanks for watching.